Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We'll be talking about how to strengthen supply chain resiliency today in order to build a foundation for tomorrow's recovery. This is one of 4 short webinars that SAP has organized to address some of the top issues that small and mid-sized organizations are facing as a result of the pandemic. I am your host, Timo Elliott, an innovation evangelist for SAP, and I am joined today by 2 of my expert colleagues. Richard, please introduce yourself.
Timo, thank me. My name is Richard Howells. I'm based in the US with a British accent, and I'm responsible for our supply chain marketing.
And Judy.
Hello, I'm Judy Cubis, also based in the US. I'm the global marketing lead for automotive and industrial manufacturing sectors.
Thank you very much for joining us. So let's go straight to some of the issues that are facing small and mid-sized organizations today in the supply chain. Richard.
Well, we've been faced with supply chain challenges forever, but the recent pandemic has really brought supply chain to the forefront. It's at top of mind of all executives now. It started off with the pandemic starting in China, and thus a huge disruption in the supply chain for the world. And as the pandemic spread, so did the challenges, and we saw huge demand volatility. We saw spikes in demand for products such as medical equipment, and then we also for vital commodities that we need every day, and we saw a huge drop in demand for luxury items. So this high volatility in demand has caused huge impacts on how supply chains work. To address the demand, we've also seen constrained capacity, both in manufacturing and logistics, because manufacturing capacity has been constrained by closures of plants due to the pandemic spread and also shortage of resources. And the logistics constraints have been both from a global perspective, as we try and move goods across the oceans, but also at a local perspective where we have shortages of demand for equipment and for vehicles to get the products to the right place at the right time. And the final challenge that we see is the human impact. I mean, we are all challenged to get to work. The people that are the necessary workers are then concerned about safety. So all of these are driving business change, business challenges across the supply chain.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Judy, now over to you. What would you add?
Thank you, Timo. I mean, I think Richard has highlighted the challenges. I mean, demand volatility, especially with the stay-at-home orders. I mean, certain segments have been impacted dramatically with a lot of dealers closed. The demand for new cars has collapsed across the spectrum. And within the human risk, it's involving a lot of changes on the factory floor. How do the companies manage their shifts to make sure that the interaction of shift changes are minimizing the interaction between people? How do they set up their lines or adjust them to make sure people can stay 6 feet apart? Even just clocking in, making sure that that device is cleaned regularly, because those places where everybody touches, you know, are sort of very at risk for transmitting the virus.
Thank you, Judy. Well, let's get to the heart of what we're really here for, which is one thing to talk about the issues, but of course, we'd like to know what small and medium-sized organizations can actually do about some of these issues. So, Richard, back over to you. What's your advice for our audience?
Well, SAP's provided free access to select software to address some of these short-term challenges. And you can get more information on our website. But specifically to the ones that we've highlighted here, from a supply side, a friend of mine has a clothing manufacturing company, and he saw huge disruptions because he was 100% reliant on supply of materials from China. So he very quickly had to adapt his suppliers to identify new sources of supply. And one of the examples of what we've provided as a service is the discovery tool, which allows you to post your needs for materials and then get quick responses from suppliers wherever they may be, locally or around the globe, where they have supply that can match your demand. From a demand standpoint, the real challenge of uncertain demand is the bullwhip effect across the supply chain. We're seeing disruptions everywhere, and the ability to match this volatile demand with uncertain supply is a real challenge. And we're seeing companies looking to leverage cloud-based planning solutions so that they can access the data and they can make decisions and simulations on the fly of seeing different alternatives, how to map that supply to demand and manage exceptions and alerts. When we talk about capacity constraints, one of the biggest examples of capacity constraints is the constraint of logistics. Finding the freight carriers that can move your goods from point A to point B, to the stores that require the goods, to the hotspots that are needing them in an emergency. So having visibility across a logistics network and leveraging networks, a business logistics network, would be another mechanism for accessing data around who can actually move your goods from point A to point B. You can put your shipments out to tender and then have a list of all of the suppliers within the vicinity who are able and available to move those goods from point A to point B. And the final example, when we talk about human risk, it's all about environmental health and safety. Having the tools in place to have visibility of what are good best practices. Judy mentioned some of the examples about social distancing within the manufacturing facilities, the changeovers of and clean down of equipment, the physical changeover without physical contact of shifts. All of these have to be managed, and having tools in place to identify the best practices to manage the environmental health and safety of your employees is critical at times like this.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Judy, over to you. What are you seeing?
I think one of the things that we are seeing is innovation. There's a lot of examples out there of sort of rising to the challenge, retooling, repiloting, especially a lot of examples with 3D printing from big manufacturers through to small, being able to retool those 3D printers to make some of the equipment that's needed for the medical people on the front line. And those stories have been really heartening. I think the other point is collaboration. You know, big companies and small companies collaborating to share designs, to share their logistics network, to really sort of address the crisis at the moment. So I think being able to see this innovation during the current crisis has been really great.
I think that's an excellent point. One of my favorites was some Italian engineers that used 3D printing to create a valve that connected to a type of snorkeling mask that could then be used to create working ventilators to help save lives. So I think agility and flexibility and adapting to the circumstances is clearly what everybody is aiming for in this current environment. So that we've talked about what's happening and how companies can weather the storm today. But obviously, at the same time, we're hoping that organizations can start laying the foundation for doing things in new ways in the future, and hopefully looking forward to future growth as we come out of this. So let me turn to you this time, Judy. What can companies do now, even as they're coping with the short term? What can they do to think about where they want to be in the next few years' time?
I think Richard covered a lot of these points, but really taking them to the next level. I mean, visibility and transparency of the entire supply chain is going to be really important going forward. Seeing where the stress points are, where your vulnerabilities are, especially with manufacturers that are single sourcing items, really looking at, you know, maybe where alternatives are and how you can address those in the future. I think the next point is really about improving these planning cycles. We've seen over the last couple of months how quickly things change, really within days. Having the capacity to really run your planning cycles much more frequently and have a really up-to-date real-time view of what your demand and your supply situation is going to continue to be important for whatever situation that we'll see in the future. I think modular manufacturing, the ability to reconfigure manufacturing floors, whether that's to adjust to demand, change the production, or even be able to manage social distancing if we ever need to do again. I think these are all techniques that will give manufacturers a lot more flexibility in the future to deal with uncertainty and any other changes that come up. I think all of this can be encompassed under Industry 4.0. You know, having digitalization, automation, and visibility all come together. So really looking at technologies, intelligent technologies that can help digitize your supply chain and your factory lines to improve the automation for the future is something that all small manufacturers should be looking at. And we've talked a lot, or I've talked a lot about the factories and on the shop floor, but there's a lot of people who also needed to work, and having these tools in the cloud makes it a lot easier to work from different locations. A lot of small manufacturers, I think one of their biggest challenges was setting up people at home to work from home with systems that weren't necessarily designed to do that. So looking at cloud-based manufacturing and planning solutions may give smaller manufacturers more flexibility in the future. So back to you, Timo.
Thank you very much. And yes, talking about working from home, we are indeed all working from home on this webinar. So Richard, anything to add about what the future is going to look like?
Well, I think what we're going to see a lot of is we're still going to have global supply chains, but with much more local execution. Finding suppliers who are local suppliers as well as global suppliers so that you can adjust based on different business challenges. The whole concept of networks is critical. I mean, whatever role you play in the network, you may be a subcontractor to a larger company. You may be a supplier of finished goods to a retail store. Whatever your role in the end-to-end supply chain, your ability to collaborate and partner will be key moving forward, even more so than it was in the past. Having visibility of which shippers can ship goods for you, of which contract manufacturers you can work with. The examples that we're seeing today of large automotive manufacturers manufacturing ventilators to increase the capacity and ability to deliver large volumes of goods for much smaller ventilator manufacturers is a great example of this, because they not only provide additional capacity, but they also provide the bargaining power to negotiate with suppliers to get the materials. Because one of the largest challenges that we're seeing is that having the materials available for these manufacturers to manufacture the goods that are required in short space of time and at high volumes. So collaboration is going to be key for companies of all sizes. And collaboration can make big companies look agile and small companies look large and powerful.
Absolutely. It's clearly we're all in this together. The solution has to be all of us working more closely than ever before, even as we are sitting further apart than ever before. Thank you for listening in. We hope you found this information valuable. It's a challenging time for all of us. SAP and our partners are ready to assist.